Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train, and welcome to E-Train Talks. I'm a 12-year-old literacy advocate, podcast host, Giving Tuesday Spark leader, and today is an incredibly special day for me personally, and I know for everyone tuning in as well. It's special because today I'm bringing you a one-of-a-kind chat with an amazing middle grade author, a storyteller of remarkable and memorable stories, from fantasy to realistic fiction to mystery and everything in between. This is my chat with the creator of over 40 books written for children and young people, the award-winning author, Stacy McAnulty. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. That was quite an introduction.
Well, it is such a treat to have you on today, and I've loved your writing for many, many years. I mean, I say many, many because it's probably like a quarter of my life I've been reading your stories.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I'm 12, so it's not really saying much, but
When you say it
So,
in fractions, it still sounds really good.
yeah. So, let's first talk about your newest story, The
Mhm.
Evers Forever 12. The idea of living forever is a captivating topic that many have fantasized about throughout the ages. And however, from reading your new story, we discovered that there can be many downsides to living forever. We find out that it can be a gift, but a curse at the same time. So prior to writing your story, had you been someone who dreamt about living forever? And after researching and writing your intriguing story, do you feel any differently about the topic?
Yeah, I can't say I've ever dreamed about living forever on Earth. That would be a lot. I mean, some days can be very long, right?
Yeah,
So that's I can't say I've ever actually fantasized about it, but I've thought about it, and I've thought about kind of the lore that we've heard. Often they are associated with vampires and different kinds of monsters. That idea of being here for a long time. I guess the part that really excites me is the idea that if you live for a very long time, if you're around for a very long time, you could get really good at things. You could have lots of time to practice, lots of time to read, lots of time to study, and just become remarkable in certain ways. And I think that's what I really kind of latched on to because, of course, in the book, the kids are 12 and they haven't been around that long as you've mentioned about yourself. So if you have these people that look 12 but are actually 200, 300 years old, imagine what they're capable of. And
right.
they can come across as normal looking tweens, but they really have this history and this advantage that no other human on earth would have.
Yeah, and I think what really excites me is the idea of not aging really, but still living forever.
Right.
Although being 12 can have disadvantages even if you know everything, because
Absolutely, because that's
people
what,
don't
like, if
really
you think about what age you'd wanna be stuck
exactly.
in your body, like, what age you'd wanna be stuck at for, forever, I don't think anybody would pick 12. I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
29 or something.
a lot of people underestimate 12-year-olds, and that's kind of the problem if you wanna live forever at that age.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that, I try to touch on a little bit with the book too, that we underestimate, kids
Yeah,
often, and so it's fun to explore that side of it as well.
definitely. So, you introduced 2 strong and intelligent main characters, Ivy and Ronan, and they both get accepted into the prestigious West Archer Academy. It's a school for the gifted, and Ivy, however, she's super duper smart, but she has a constant feeling of guilt inside of her and struggles with her emotions before and after taking the entrance exam. All the answers were already written for her on her card. So in a sense, she cheated even though she knew all the answers. So I feel like this deep secret really adds a lot of emotion and helps set the stage for a really compelling storyline. So why and how did you come up with such a complete theme for the story of guilt on top of everything that Ivy learns about her newfound friends?
Right. So yeah, so Ivy is our and is not an ever. She is not forever 12. So
Right.
she's gotta legitimately get into this school and she takes
Mhm.
the entrance exam and that, like you said, the answers are provided for her. She doesn't ask for them. She doesn't look at the person next to her and cheat, but is it still cheating? If you
Yeah.
don't come forward and say, "Hey, I have an advantage." I like those kind of questions in my writing where it's not clearly black and white. I have those fun conversations with my own children. Is this right? Is this wrong? And we like to explore those gray areas. So I think it's an interesting twist to the book. And of course, you've read it, so there's it
Yeah,
plays a role to the plot, like the reason for the cheating later on, and it hangs over her head. So it's multifaceted. I feel like that scene has always been there. This book got revised probably more than any book I've ever written. It's the first time I've done a fantasy, and it's the first time I've done mystery. But that is one of the scenes that was always there. I kind of always knew I needed Ivy to not feel adequate in going to the school because of the other kids that are Evers, and because she didn't get in. She probably would have gotten in on her own merit, but she did not. So it's always going to weigh on her. So that's something that's always been in the book, and from one of the early drafts.
absolutely. And it really did drive the plot in a really interesting way. And I like what you said about how a lot of your writing doesn't have gray areas because we can now transition to Millionaires for the Month, another story of yours that I read. And so to kind of sum it up, it's a really intriguing concept. So basically, you have your two protagonists, Felix and Benji, and they end up having a penny doubled every day, which amasses $5,368,709.12 in total for them to spend. This is all after they find and spend $20 from a billionaire's lost wallet. And like you said, there's always the idea of right and wrong. They were like, it's just $20. Maybe it's not that bad. So I don't wanna talk for too long because we gotta get to the actual question, but their reward, or I guess punishment, you could also think of it like that, is that they have to spend all the money that they are given in 1 month. So that seems easy, right? But it's not. So, how did you come up with this awesome storyline, and what made you decide to include the message that, in a sense, money isn't everything, it's really complicated?
Yeah. This the idea for this book came from a silly dinner conversation with my family. We were driving into town. We were going to PF Chang's, and as we were driving in, we had the billboards up along the highway that were for Mega Millions and Powerball, the lotteries.
Mm,
And if you had won either one of those, they're worth half a billion each, so 500 million each. And if you'd won them both, you'd be a billionaire. So my kids loved talking about that idea of having all this money and how they would spend it. Strangely, my children thought they'd be able to quit school. I've told them that, even billionaires' kids go to schools, fancy schools, but they would still have to go to school. So but we went all the way in the highway, like 30 minutes on the highway, get to PF Chang's. We're eating fried rice. We're, ordering, eating, paying our bill. They're still talking about money and how they would spend the money. And I realized there was something there. There was that idea for kids. They find it intriguing because tweens aren't often in charge of finance. They don't get to make a lot of decisions. Maybe you get money for your birthday and things like that you get to spend. But overall finances are not something given to children.
yeah,
So I loved the idea that these kids were in charge and making all the decisions. And as you mentioned, it is not a reward, it's a challenge. There's a ton of rules that they have to follow. If they successfully spend all the money, they will get $10 million free and clear. The other thing, the other part of the question was, why did I like the idea of looking at what money can't buy? And I think back to Steve Jobs, which of course the founder, one of the founders, co-founders, creator of Apple. So guy's a billionaire, right? He has
mhm,
all the money in the world. He has cancer. And I can't remember what kind of cancer at this point, but he has cancer and he has access to everything. He could buy anything. He can get the best scientist, best whatever, and still, and the cancer ends up taking his life. That's what he dies from, and at a relatively young age. And I just remember that moment for me being kind of like, even, this guy's got everything, but he doesn't. And I just really like that idea. So we play with that with the boys, with the, um, things that they can't buy, even if they have access to all this money. I just think it's, again, what these interesting questions, these interesting things to talk about around the family table. Like, what can you buy? What would you buy? What can't you buy? I love those questions.
Yeah, and it really made for an awesome plot. And now moving to the miscalculations of Lightning Girl.
I like
Uh,
long titles.
yeah. Yeah, my tongue sometimes doesn't. A bit of a tongue twister, but regardless, it's an amazing story. I read it during COVID and I just loved it. So, for those tuning in who've yet to read this amazing novel, it's the story of Lucy and how she deals with her gifts, her OCD, and the ins and outs of life as a middle schooler. So, she was struck by lightning at 8 years old, and that made her a math genius. And that might make you think that being a math whiz is she'd just have everything. She could do anything. But life isn't always easy for gifted kids, especially in, of course, middle school. So, did you research any other examples of lightning strikes altering the way people's brains work? Are there any other examples of that actually happening? Is that kind of the foundation of miscalculations of Lightning Girl's research?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? Right, to
Mhm.
think about that in the real world. Um, I to write this book, I had originally heard a story about someone who has, they call it acquired savant syndrome. So they have a head injury and they become a savant. And
Mhm.
it was an adult, and it wasn't a lightning strike. He was mugged, and I believe he was punched in the head, but he also falls and hits his head on the sidewalk after he recovers from his concussion. He's a math genius.
Mm.
And so I started looking up acquired savant syndrome and other savant syndromes. And these are real things. There are people that have head injuries and become brilliant in different areas. And the areas in general are math, which is my favorite. I'm a former engineer. I love math. You have the area of math, music. So those would be people that would just start playing the piano without ever taking a lesson. They can't necessarily read music, but just the mechanics of it and hearing it, they're able to play music. Art, so people that are fantastic artists, again, without any training, they could look at like a skyscape of New York City and then paint it perfectly and have like all everything proportioned right and in the right area. And then the final one is a foreign language. So someone might hear, it could be something like Spanish a couple times and they're speaking Spanish, or even a language that's even more foreign and not perhaps related to their native language like English. Like if we went and heard Icelandic or something, and then after a week we could be speaking Icelandic. So these things really do happen, and they research it. So I was just blown away by this idea that you could have some kind of head injury and then be brilliant. Now, results are not guaranteed. I'm not advocating for anyone to get struck by lightning or pound themselves in the head. It's very, very rare. And the reason why they study it is basically it's a neuroscience. Imagine if we could go in with like a nano computer or nano robot and like burn part of our brain, just kill off a little tiny bit of our brain, and it would make another part of our brain light up and be awesome. That's why they study it. They don't know why it happens. It's most often happens in adults and in men. It's much more common than in women, but they haven't figured it out yet. It's amazing stuff.
Well, maybe one day that'll happen to one of you, and then you can all tell your story. Though, like Stacy said, we do not support getting yourself struck by lightning, and no lawsuits should come our way.
No, yes. Avoid lightning.
Yeah, avoid it at all costs. Like go inside, do all that. So, now that I'm in middle school myself, I can relate even more to what Lucy went through. And besides loving the story, I can also really appreciate how amazing it is that you included and celebrated a neurodivergent protagonist. So, is embracing diverse and inclusive protagonists in your stories important to you? And how do you get into their head and craft such relatable yet unique characters?
Yeah, I find that very interesting to have these neurodivergent characters and different characters that think and see the world differently from me. It makes writing interesting and fun. And in Lightning Girl, she has OCD, with part of her acquired savant syndrome. So the way she's viewing the world through kind of this math lens and also dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder. But then she's got friends who see the world differently. Her one of her best friends is or becomes her best friend is Levi, who's a photographer, and he sees the world just so completely different. And I just think it's super fun to write that way and to see like middle school, like most of us go through middle school, to see middle school from those different perspectives. Now, to get Lucy correct and her OCD correct, I did talk to a psychologist and to a parent of a child with OCD. So I don't want to kind of glaze over an issue or something. So I do try to do the research and get it right to make sure that even though she's a made up character, that I'm being realistic to her needs.
My next question for you is a little bit more about Millionaires for the Month. So, another thing I really enjoyed about it was seeing a friendship grow from two kids who barely even knew each other. They just built such a strong connection, and friendship is one of the major reasons why I love reading middle grade. It's one of the most prominent and interesting themes because there's so many different kinds of friendships. So, that's what I love about middle grade, but what do you love about writing for middle graders the most?
Um, well, I very much remember what it was like to be in middle school, and not all middle grade necessarily means middle school, but I do remember those, sixth, seventh grade years very vividly, and the things that stressed me out, the things that were important to me. So, those memories come back fairly easily. And I'm a mom, and my kids have gone through middle school too, so to see
Yeah,
them experience it, so I I think it's a very emotional time, a very true time. I'm not downplaying any of the emotions. They're just very raw and very true. So I like doing that. But part of my favorite thing about middle grade is that they always end on a happy note. I'm not saying they always have a happy ending, but at the end there's a place of hope. You don't necessarily get that in young adult, and you don't. I don't want to say rarely get that in adult books, but
yeah.
middle grade is going to end in a place of hope, which I think is really neat. I recently went to a a festival, and I was as an attendee and just listened to other writers, and I ended up at a romance panel. So all the people on the panel were romance writers, and they said for a romance book, it always has to have a happy ending. They always have to get
Mhm.
together. And I saw this like very cool connection between middle grade and romance. Like we're going to end in both those kind of books in great places and places of hope. A lot of the relationships are going to work out, or if they ended, they needed to end so characters can move on.
Mhm.
And I just maybe that's why romance is also right now having a great moment. We like
Yeah.
that as readers. We like to have those happy ending and those ending with hope. I think that's super super cool, and that's how I like to spend my time with books.
It's time for a question about a book that's not necessarily middle grade. So, my question is about I'm gonna try and right here, yeah. Pointing is hard on Zoom.
Yes.
So not only does Stacy write fun and meaningful middle grade fiction, but I also discovered that she writes and crafts super sweet picture books with the best messages. So one that really struck me is right here, A Small Kindness. And you might not know, but one of my nonprofit and just general being a human being missions is to spread kindness and generosity. And your book really demonstrates the wonderful effects of sharing small, kind acts. It's like a butterfly effect, or as like you said in the book, spreading kindness is like a game of tag. So I noticed that the book was published in February of 2021, not long after, or even really during the end of the COVID pandemic. So did you write this story during COVID, and what prompted you to write it?
So I wrote it before the pandemic, and
Mm,
books take quite a while to publish, especially
yeah.
when working with an artist. But it did come out during the pandemic, which was kind of interesting because we talk about spreading kindness, and then the word "spread" became like a bad word. We you think about things that spreading germs is bad, spreading
Yeah.
gossip is bad, but spreading kindness is, of course, good.
Mhm.
Um, so it came out during the pandemic, and the original idea for this came from something my husband did with my oldest daughter when she was in middle school. So she's going off to middle school, and she chose a middle school that's not our neighborhood school.
Mm,
So she didn't know a lot of kids. She knew some that was still like our school district, but she had to drive about 30 minutes in, and my husband would drive her every morning. And she was nervous about going to this middle school and not knowing people. And my husband's like, just say hello to someone every day. Just start your day by walking in, whether you know them or not, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a kid, a student, just go in and say hello. And if that's too much, just smile. Just start your day that way. Just start it on this good note and see what happens. And I just loved that idea. Like, we don't have to make huge gestures that sometimes we think to do a good deed, it's going to cost a lot of money or take a lot of time. And that's
right.
not necessarily true. We can do little things and they can have a big impact.
Mhm.
Something I like to tell kids at school visits is way back when in 2013, I came very close to quitting writing. Like, I'm not trained to be a
Really?
writer. I struggled for a long time to get anything published, and I came very close to quitting. And that day I was like crying. I'm like, enough. I'm going to go back to engineering. I'm not going to write anymore. And my son's preschool teacher had read something I'd written, and she wrote me like an email that afternoon, just said, "Oh, Stacy, I read this. It was really good. Thanks for sharing." It was like 2 lines. It took her maybe 30 seconds, and she kept me from quitting. And
Wow.
she might not, I don't even think she knows that. Her name's Donna. That afternoon, I was very low. I was very upset. I was thinking this was never going to happen for me. And her little email, her little 30-second email had an impact that, that, I mean, you can think of it as changing my life, that kept me writing. And now, nearly 40 books later, I'm still doing this. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. Now it's time for some questions that aren't necessarily related to books, but I did find them on your website and they're pretty interesting. So, I read that you are a Green Bay Packers fan, and to put it bluntly, as a Seahawks fan, I am not a very big fan of the Packers. So, I read that you're from New York actually. So, what's the story of you becoming or just always being a cheesehead?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because my dad is a Giants fan. My mom and brother are Washington fans. I went to school in Buffalo, so I was around Bills fans for 4 years. I fell for the Packers way back when I was in high school because the family was just kind of arguing,
Mm,
and they're like, "Stacy, you don't even like football. You don't know anything about football. Who's your favorite team?" And I looked down at a list and I'm like, "My favorite team is the Green Bay Packers." And I stuck with it. I stuck with it for, 30 years. So it was just like a random moment where I had to pick a team, and that's who I picked. And I've been loyal ever since. And I went to one game in Green Bay way back in the 90s, and then I've seen them play on the road, like when they come to Carolina, and
yeah.
saw them in Buffalo as well.
That's really cool. And I guess this really family arguing can also kinda impact your life in a big way in a good way, not in a
Yeah.
bad arguing way. So, I also read that you're a Taylor Swift fan, and
Mm.
I'm a fellow Swiftie as well, and not just because she's been, like, all around the NFL world, but even before. So, I'm curious, I know that there are a lot of library Swifties out there, teacher Swifties. I'm saying the word so much just makes me, like, feel like it's like, like, if you say a word so many times, it doesn't feel like a real word anymore?
Yes.
I feel like that. Swiftie isn't necessarily a real I guess okay, I'm rambling. Anyway, what is your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Oh, I always say "Last Kiss" is my favorite. I also really like Style, but I get into the new stuff as well. I'll
Yeah.
get obsessed with a song for a while. Do you have a favorite song?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think I like Bad Blood. I think that's a good song.
Yes, that is.
I Yeah, I think it was on, like, 1989 album?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I know stuff. Mm.
Yep.
And now it's time for a question that's usually the last question of the interview, but we have a special question coming after. So it's the typical last question of the interview, but it's not today. Woo. So if you could be or meet any literary character, it could be your favorite author or your favorite book character, who would it be and why?
Um, so I've been asked similar questions to this before, and the usual answer I give is like a character I'm writing.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm working on a new middle grade novel, and the main character's name is Samantha, and I would just love to meet her and help her. I want her to work out some of the problems I've created for her. I would love to sit down with her, and maybe she could take some of the pressure off me as we try to finish this book. So that's one of my silly answers. An even sillier answer, I was thinking about this, is a Mother Bruce the Bear by Ryan Higgins. We went to Alaska this summer and I didn't see a single bear, and I'm
Oh,
still disappointed about that. So I've got bear on the brain, and I would like to meet, especially a grumpy yet caring, talkative bear. I guess he's not really talkative, but he does have the ability to communicate. So I would go with Mother Bruce, from Ryan Higgins books.
that's a great answer. And I love silly answers as well. So it's like the perfect combination.
Yeah. I know, it's like I should come up with a serious, like,
Uh,
thoughtful, make
you
me look
know,
smart answer, but
yeah. I mean, you already wrote 40 books, so you already seem smart enough. So
there you go.
we have to add some silly in there. So to promote our talk and your newest story, will you share why kids will love your book, The Evers Forever 12?
Oh, so, what I hope they love is, and what I think will draw them in, is kind of the mystery. We're trying to figure out why these kids don't age. Is it a permanent thing? Is there, like, is there a solution? How is Ivy related, to them? Like, what is her tie-in? Why does she look like their friend that went missing? So I'm hoping it's the mystery
Mm,
that draws them in, and it's a duology, so the next one will come out this October, called Never 13, and that'll answer some of the questions that we don't quite get to in Forever 12. So I think it's the mystery that's the most exciting part, and the new part for me as well, trying to have this all these loose ends tie
yeah.
up in a satisfying way.
Well, I, for one, cannot wait for Never 13 to come out. And I'm sure now everybody knows that Forever 12 is a masterpiece of middle grade.
Aw, thank you.
It's awesome. And it's also, I love the concept of, I mean, no, I'm not gonna say that that's a spoiler. Don't say spoilers. What? That's literally the opposite of your job, you train. What are you doing? Uh,
I know
so
it's so hard because people be like, "What's your favorite scene?" or "What's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that gives this away. That gives this away." I can't. Like I said,
yeah,
having a mystery and not writing a traditional contemporary middle grade is different. I'm finding it harder to talk about. I feel a little tongue tied and a little
absolutely, yeah.
uh, my brain goes in many different directions. But
So I guess the line that you just have to keep saying is, "You have to read the book to find out what happens
yes,
next."
exactly. And I love getting the emails from readers when
Yeah.
after they read it, and wanting to know some answers that I still can't tell yet.
You'll find out soon, young ones.
Yes,
Soon.
yes, exactly.
So, this has been such an awesome talk. I've been a fan of your storytelling since 4th grade, and I'm so happy to be able to hear and share your writing journey, Stacy.
Well, thank
So,
you so
I'm just
much for
thinking,
having me.
yeah, thank you for coming on. And I'm just thinking about all the kids that you've made smile through all 40 something of your stories. And even just from this interview, I'm sure that there are some kids out there who are now about to discover their new favorite author, new favorite book. So, you kids, you adults, everybody listening, you guys are all amazing. You need to keep on reading, and by reading, I mean reading all of Stacy McAnulty's stories, from Millionaires for the Month to the Ever's Forever 12, and our picture books are perfect read alouds for your young ones as well. There's fun, there's fantasy, and there's so much heart in all of Stacy's stories. So, once again, this is E Train. This has been such a special interview. I don't know why I'm pointing like this. And yeah. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, stay safe, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.